Alright guys, what is going on? I'm here with another episode of Reddit Read. Now really quickly, I do apologize. I have not uploaded or streamed or whatever I think been about a month, roughly, maybe a little bit longer, give or take maybe a week. I just been really busy with work. Thankfully, this is the long weekend for basically me to make some streams to kind of make up for that. So without further ado, as you guys read in the title, today's story is I think I'm interviewing a killer. Hello everyone. This is my first time sharing this story, but I think it's the right place. For legal reasons, I've changed all the names and some locations. I've been a freelance writer for about 5 years now, with most of my jobs being ghostwriting college papers and 50 Shades of Grey ripoffs. That's where the real ghostwriting money is, but that's a whole separate non-sleep story. While a big chunk of my work these days comes from previous connections with publishers and local students, Tampa, Florida, I often get work proposals on various freelancer websites. This particular request came in July of last year. Write a biography, $35,000. Right off the bat, it seemed sketchy. The price was just too good to be true, and well above my pay grade, even for such a complicated task. Plus, whoever sent it had no profile picture and no previous engagements on the site. Surely a scam artist. But curiosity got the best of me and I clicked on it anyway. I guess a part of me secretly hoped this was legit. The proposal itself was from one Mary Smith, who was writing me on behalf of her boss, John Taylor. Mr. Taylor, she said, had a rich life. And now that he was retired, he wanted to share his memories of it with the world. She also said that he was impressed with my portfolio and believed I was the perfect man for the job. With my portfolio being what it is, imagine what sort of memories the man wanted to share. As Mr. Taylor was rather fragile in his old age and not at all tech savvy, they would require me to come out to Tampa Palms to conduct interviews and take notes. Some quick Googling revealed that Tampa Palms was a rather nice neighborhood and that John Taylor was a real person living there, which could still mean the scammers were using his good name, or had chosen it at random, or any number of things. But the next few sentences got me even more curious. Mary Smith said if I agreed before the end of the day, they'd pay me $5,000 advanced, which was a serious claim, since all payments are protected by the website, and the money would go directly to my PayPal account. The rest of the details she would give me after I accepted the proposal. I could no longer contain the excitement. This was still too good to be true, and I was sure it was a scam, but I thought I'd have fun with it. Surely if I clicked accept proposal, Mary Smith, whoever she was, would blink, right? So I clicked it. I didn't expect anything to happen right away, and it didn't. Nor did anything happen for the next few hours. So at about 10:45 p.m., I decided the scammer had moved on. Surprisingly, just half an hour later, I received a notification on my phone. Milestone created. I opened the email and saw Mary Smith had created a payment of $5,000. And while I was trying to process it, I got another notification that said the payment had been released. Another email popped up, this one from PayPal, saying it would take 1 to 3 days to process it. Still, I couldn't believe it. This was real. A little later, I received a message from Mary, saying both she and Mr. Taylor were happy I agreed to help, and that they'd be waiting for me the following week. I said I might need a few days to wrap up my previous job and get ready for the new one. But in reality, I needed the time to make sure this was in fact not a scam. Mary said she understood and left a contact number with an 813 code. I spent the next couple of days looking into Mr. Taylor, but found nothing out of the ordinary. He was 79 or 80 years old, from a wealthy enough family. There was a newspaper article about a car accident he was in, back in 1991, but nothing else that drew attention. By all means, John Taylor didn't seem to be a guy worth writing a biography about. But what the hell, as long as he was willing to pay. The following Thursday, I got an email from PayPal. I had become $5,000 richer. There was a momentary temptation to block Mary and disappear, but I quickly brushed it aside. The job was real, and that meant there was $30,000 waiting for me in a couple of months. And here my dad thought I'd be a starving writer. Once I could think straight again, I went online and messaged Mary, saying I received the advance and she was available and was available and was available when they would have me. Sorry guys. Saying I'd received the advance and was available when they would have me. To my surprise, Mary offered to meet not at the Taylor residence. I had Googled the address, but at an Olive Garden nearby. While it struck me as a bit odd, I reasoned there was something she wanted to tell me about her boss, or just make sure I was serious about the job. A test, in other words. The following day, I made myself to look presentable and professional, dressing up and packing a nice kit of a notebook, a recorder, etc. I hoped I looked presentable to the old man. I hopped into my old Accord ghostwriting dough. I like that one. And drove about 20 minutes later, and I made a right turn and parked. I assumed Mary was already waiting for me, but I decided to call her just to make sure. The 813 number answered with long beeps, and then went to voicemail. 2 more calls had the same results. I went in then, and gave the place a look. There were several women, but none of them looked like they were waiting for anyone. And when I stared directly at them, they only looked away. I took a table and ordered coffee, making calls every 5 minutes or so. No answer. Getting a feeling I'd been stood up. I paid and left Olive Garden. In retrospect, I should have just driven back home and forgotten about the whole thing. Maybe even returned the $5,000. But being a responsible person, I tried to call Mary a few more times and then decided to drive to Mr. Taylor's house so that if anything, I'd have tried my best. Tampa Palms is a nice planned community. Perfect suburban houses with 2-car garages, kids on bikes, and so on. But driving deeper into it, I found more expensive homes behind tall gates and nicely cut trees. I felt like I was in the farthest corner of the neighborhood, as there were no cars on the road, and all I could see around were trees and iron gates with houses behind them. One of those houses had to belong to Mr. Taylor. Sure enough, a moment later, the GPS told me I'd reached my destination. I stopped in front of the gate and got out to buzz in, but it began opening right away, forcing me to jump back behind the wheel. I drove up a fine paved road. As the gate closed behind me, it felt like I'd been transported into another world, quiet and secluded. The way I always imagined the Hamptons back when I lived in New York. But the house itself didn't live up to my expectations, even though it was huge. It wasn't exactly a palace. I said it was twice as big as the house I saw in the regular part of the neighborhood. It had columns and some marble, which gave it a somewhat more expensive look, but I had a feeling it was cars in front of the house, a bright red Mondeo, which had to belong to Mary, and an enormous GMC van, which had to have a wheelchair lift. I parked next to it and got out, taking my time, expecting Mary to come out to meet me, but all in vain. Determined, I walked up the steps and rang the doorbell. A minute or so later, I heard 3 different locks go off. And then the door opened, That's a lot of locks. I'm just saying, you live in a gated community, to speak, and then you have that many locks. I don't know. Afternoon, Mr. Warner. An old voice croaked from the dim hallway. I got chills, but stepped in confidently. The hall was unusually dark for this time of the day, but that didn't scare me. What did, however, was the old man in front of me. A shell of a man, to be honest. John Taylor was the size of a kid, and a starved kid at that. His small eyes were set deep in his skull, which was partially visible through his pale skin. Sorry, was practically visible through his pale skin, and what few hairs he had on his head reminded me of spider webs. That's a pretty realistic comparison there. His left hand was gripped around an IV stand. An IV stand. Sorry, guys. I was going to say a 4 stand. I was like, what? That doesn't make sense. The plastic bag dripping. A tube going into his arm. He looked a little like the photographs of him I'd seen online. When he offered me his hand to shake, I felt like I was shaking hands with a skeleton. His skin was cold and papery. I put on a smile, doing my best to hide my unease. Mr. Taylor offered a smile of his own, and he didn't seem to mind me much at all. Lock the door, will ya? The woman, I swear. He left me to deal with the numerous locks as he shuffled across the hallway, the wheels of his IV stand making awful noises. I considered bolting then and there, but for some reason I simply locked the door and followed the old man into what turned out to be the kitchen. There was a weird stench throughout the house, the smell of an old person who was about to die, and immediately I felt guilty about the thought and about taking the money from the poor guy in the first place. But then again, it's not like he'd be needing it for long. Beer, Mr. Warner? I watched him shuffle to the fridge. I'm good, thank you. When he got himself a can, I joined him at the dinner table and said, What happened to Mary? My call didn't reach her. He looked up at me as if trying to remember the name, and then said, Oh, Mary, yes. She's around, don't worry. Good thing you found me. After a pause, he changed the subject. I trust you find your payment satisfactory? I couldn't hold back a smile. Very much so, Mr. Taylor. And thanks for the advance. It'll help a lot. I wish all clients paid up front without. He cut me off, raising his hand slightly. Please, call me John. I know I look old, but I'm young at heart. He sipped his beer and gave me a small nod. Not sure what to say or do next. I didn't want to push him into an interview until I felt comfortable enough. I looked out the window and at the backyard, which was a wide space covered with yellowing grass and fenced by trees. After a few minutes of silence, John said, to no one in particular, She's a nurse, Mary, not an assistant, a nurse. I'm old, you see. I need people to look after me. I hope she turns up soon. He gave me a wink. I swallowed. So did she. Just kidding. I think I knew what he meant by that, and I could only hope I wouldn't be stuck there fulfilling Mary's role. Oh, Jesus Christ, that's not good. Getting impatient, I took the notebook and the recorder out of my bag and put them on the table. John seemingly ignored it, but put his beer down. I took it as a signal to proceed. So, whenever you feel like it, John, I'm ready. It's useful to go chronologically, but feel free to start wherever you like. He was quiet again for a long minute, then said, You know who she reminds me of, Mary? Sweet old Barb. I only then hit the record button, so I asked, Your wife? My. Oh no, I've never been married. I scribbled, Married? In my notebook, because I clearly remembered that newspaper article about John's accident referring to him as a widower. Barb was my nanny when I was a lad, back in 1949, sorry. In Colorado, this was. She was good to us kids. Always a smile on her young face. She must have been 20 or so. He trailed off. You were close. I mean, I know what you mean. She was like a mother to me. And then he added, she went missing in 1952 when I was 13. There was yet another long pause. Did they ever find her? I asked, putting down her name. I don't think so. I don't think they were looking hard enough. There was something about the way he said that last bit that made me wince. Is that wince? Wince? Wink? Not even too sure what that means. It was as if he was proud? As if it was a riddle they didn't find the answer to, and he was the riddler. Sorry, they didn't find the answer to, and he was the riddler. To change the subject, I said, so you spent your childhood in Colorado. I didn't say that, did I? We spent a few years there, until Barb went missing. Oh, again that tone, as if discussing a personal victory, rather than a tragedy. Do you want to tell me more about Barb? I tried. I didn't know yet how personal he would allow me to go. But he hadn't heard the question. I looked up at him, and he was listening intently. His eyes looking through me. Then he turned his head towards the hallway. Did you hear that? He said. I shook my head, fearing that the old man's mind was playing tricks on him. Now I was listening along with him, and I thought I'd heard steps somewhere deep within the house. John stood up suddenly, starting me. So I guess he meant startling me. The floor screeching under him. You need to leave, Mr. Warner. I sat for a moment, not sure what was going on. Meanwhile, John grabbed the IV stand and began towards the hallway. We shall continue the interview some other day. Panicking, I grabbed the notebook and put it away. If it's Mary, maybe she could help us. Panicking, I grabbed the notebook and put it away. If it's Mary, maybe she can help us. No, I don't think she can. You need to go. He was making his way towards the front door and already reaching out for the top lock. And don't you worry about Mary, Mr. Warner. By the time I made it to the door, it was already wide open, daylight getting inside and giving the place an eerie look. I noticed a layer of dust on the floor, disturbed only by our recent activity. But before I could even think of anything to say, I found myself outside, with the door shut. I stood and listened for a moment, and it seemed to me John's steps were more energetic now that he'd kicked me out. They quickly disappeared inside the house, and I was left with silence. Only when I got to my car did I realize my heart was racing. There was something off about this house and about its owner, something I couldn't put my finger on. For the time being, I was happy to get the hell out of there and prayed they wouldn't contact me again. But they did. This is how my first session with John Taylor went, but it was far from my last because curiosity is a deadly drug. So that is going to be it for this episode. For this chapter of episode 10. I hope you guys enjoyed it because I really did. And until next time, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great night.